Information released by the Associated Press news agency indicate that the NYPD has been keeping extensive files on liberal organizations, both in New York and across the United States. They show the NYPD has used counter-terrorism tactics like infiltration to monitor activities protected under U.S. law. In summaries, the supervisors, investigators identified and focused on groups opposed to U.S. immigration policy, labor laws, and racial profiling. The tactics harken back to 2004, when the NYPD monitored anti-war groups and environmental activists ahead of the Republican political convention in New York. That sparked an ongoing civil rights lawsuit. More recently, it emerged that the NYPD monitored the communications and activities of Muslim communities, not just in New York City, but also in the state of New Jersey. Al Jazeera reached out to the NYPD for comment. They said nothing in the latest AP propaganda is prohibited. To the contrary, it is authorized by Justice Department guidance and FBI policy. Well, one of the names that appeared in the NYPD's report was Jordan Flaherty, who's a producer for Al Jazeera here in Washington. He says that the NYPD's surveillance program is having an effect on free speech.
I'll often speak to people at demonstrations and they'll say, I'm afraid to speak. I'm afraid because of my job. I'm afraid. And, you know, I've noticed over the years it becomes more and more common, not just in New York City, but around the country, that if you go to a protest, the police are there with cameras and they're videotaping everyone there. I've seen police videotaping or taking photos of everyone's license plates of all the cars of people that have parked near there. So you know, if you go to a demonstration today in the US, that you are being monitored, that they are in some way at least creating the groundwork for a file, if not actually creating a file on you. And that has an incredibly chilling effect. I think that even if you are not arresting people, you are limiting people's freedom of speech. If you tell people that if you go to a protest, especially one where you are being critical of the policies of your government, and you will be videotaped, you will have your license plate number noted, you will potentially have a file created on you, that is incredibly chilling.
Well, earlier I spoke with New York City Council member Jermaine Williams. I asked him what he thought of how the NYPD is justifying its surveillance activities.
The only justification that I can hear and think of is once you put the word safe in front of something, that seems to be the excuse. And that's been the excuse for a lot of terrible things that have been done not only in this country but around the world. So it's something that troubles me very much. And the NYPD is the 7th largest army in the world, and our mayor has called it his own personal army. And when you put these things together and the fact that they really don't have any oversight, they like to talk about the hand-chew agreement and other policies and guidelines, but those are really reactive policies and guidelines.
Right, this is the justification. This is the justification that they're using when they talk about the hand-chew agreement. Can you just go into that in just a little bit of detail for our international audience?
Well, I'm not an expert on our hand-chew guidelines, but it was written some years ago and then revised that really gave some guidelines to what the police can and cannot do. They bring that out a lot, but it doesn't really put in place any proactive oversight, which is the problem. So if you think that the police has violated the hand-chew guidelines, the commissioner has said before, well, the federal judge is our overseer, but that doesn't make sense because you have to then bring a lawsuit, you have to get attorneys involved, whereas there is no other agency in New York City that doesn't have some kind of oversight, whether it's from the New York City itself or another independent monitor that does the oversight. The NYPD, which is probably the one that needs it the most, is the only one that does it. So there's no one that does regular check-ins. What
kind of effect is this going to have on people who hold political views, who are politically active? I mean, is the intention, do you think, to stifle dissent, or is that going a little too far?
I don't think it's going too far at all. I think I learned today that it's called chilling. So what they're doing is basically chilling some people's First Amendment rights. If you look at what's going on with Occupy Wall Street, you see it clearly. It's not about, too many times it's not about keeping public safety. It's about suppressing any dissent, suppressing any freedom of speech.
What are your constituents telling you about what's going on within New York?
People are frustrated. very frustrated. And it scares me and it worries me because instead of coming to the table to discuss how we can handle the situation, we have a very obstinate mayor and commissioner who think that everything they do is correct, and they only do more and more of it. And I think people are getting angrier and angrier, and that's just dangerous for everyone.
That was New York City Council member Jermaine Williams talking to me earlier.